the number one secret to success in business is what? It's the topic I want to talk about. I think it's extremely important, and some people realize this, but a lot of people don't. The number one success tip in business is simply value. Um, I've learned a lot about this as like a new entrepreneur and like a beginning entrepreneur, that value is everything, and that the value is kind of like a law of the universe, that it's if you disobey that law, it's like disobeying like the laws of physics. It's like good luck doing anything at all, because and a lot of this I've learned from personal experience and then reading different books, but two of the best books that I read were the autobiography of Henry Ford, and the other one is How to Be Rich by J. Paul Getty. And both of these men went on to become billionaires. They were very successful. They had big businesses, but they were also very frugal. They were very wise with their spending in their personal life and in their business. They lived simply in certain ways, and they meticulously kind of cut costs in their business, got rid of waste, cut inefficiencies out, and made their businesses very high value businesses to their consumers. Getty made his money in the oil industry, and Henry Ford did with his cars, of course. So in Henry Ford's autobiography, he kind of says how like value is king, and that like you give a service and you have to give a service, and like they kind of achieve the full service, they get like a result, and like a good result that they're very happy with, and then only after that do you deserve the pay, and that's like how you get the pay. And for him, he didn't like doing any high ticket products either. He liked getting to the point where he could just do volume production of lower priced cars, and then over time kind of drop the price further down and down and down, and make a car that's really affordable, really high value, really affordable, anyone can afford, and then sell it to the entire United States and internationally. So that was kind of the business model that he went with, and Tesla, the car company, is following the same model right now. But the thing is that if you just give value, you have a huge edge over everyone else, and if you don't give value, it's very hard to it's almost impossible to do anything. Like, if you think about it, when you're an entrepreneur, you can say that, oh, you don't work the same hours as like a nurse or a doctor or an engineer or a plumber or any of these trades or career professions, but it's like you can't disobey a law of the universe. It's, as human beings, we're meant to kind of serve each other, and any of those jobs, they give service to another person, even in some small way. They give value to another person in some way. And what you're paid is like in direct proportion to that value. That often it can be perceived value. When you're an entrepreneur or you're a salesman, you kind of have the benefit of leverage, but that does not mean that you can skimp on your value. That doesn't mean that you can hold back and not give value, and if you do and you manage to make money, then it's like a fraud or like a scam of some kind, and it doesn't last. Like, at some point it falls out the bottom and stuff. It's like you're filling stuff up from the top and it's like falling out the bottom, if that makes sense. It all kind of crumbles at some point or another. Like, if you study Ponzi schemes, like, any of them would crumble at the bottom. Pyramid schemes, your bottom will always be dropping out, and it's like there has to be legitimate value. So as an entrepreneur, you don't really get to break any of those laws. You can, the only advantage you have is leverage, but after that, it's like you have to be extremely high value to your customers, and then they'll pay you if you're really high value, and then they have to get results, or they're going to stop coming back, or they're going to want refunds, and you're not going to get good word of mouth, and at some point the feedback loop will be like a negative feedback loop, and you will effectively not get good results, and you'll like things will kind of crumble because you didn't continue that giving value. If you look at certain like scam entrepreneurs, or like they say like info, what is it, like the marketers like Ty Lopez and Some of the people that a lot of people are like, oh, they're like scammers or they're bullshit and stuff. Their products still have to give value and will give like a decent amount of value, like Dan Lok and other people, and like some people are unhappy with them and say that they're scammers. But like they would be out of business if they were like pure like taking your money and doing nothing. They give like a decent amount of value. You can say some of their tactics are salesy. Some of them like what they'll do is like they won't give enough material in their product. Sometimes like they'll give like you just the right amount but not enough, like to the point where you have to kind of keep going up with them to work with them more, or go for upsells and more in-field coaching, more in-depth coaching, and they like kind of keep you always wanting more, which is kind of like a shady bullshit business practice. But it can sort of work, but not really. It's better if you just give pure value 100%, but they give like pure value maybe 70 to 80%, and then the other 20% is like kind of bullshit, like led to you keep coming back. But if they gave like 0% value, they would get nothing. And they have to give like a decent amount of value to get something up front, to be able to even survive. And that's the whole point. And like the scammers and fraudsters, as good as a talker, as good as a salesman you can be, if you have like bullshit to sell, it crumbles at the other end of it. It doesn't work. I think that's the case. Like everything in the world is a value exchange. People like everything, seriously, that like it's like your friendships, your relationships, who you are in the world. Are you attractive or not? Are you do you have money or not? Do you have power or not? Status, or do you have happiness? Like any of this is a value exchange. If your friends are not getting value from you, then you kind of stop being friends. And it's the same thing. If you're not getting value from your friends, it doesn't matter how long you've been friends for, like you'll kind of tend to drift apart and you'll want to hang around them less, and that's fair. Same relationships and girls and dating. Like if your girl is not happy, like good luck. But this is an important thing too, which I can briefly tangent, is that like girls, like in bed, what happens a lot of the time, the woman doesn't finish. But if you as the guy can get the woman to finish and to get there, and like no other guy can, like will she treat you differently? Yeah, she's getting value from your relationship, and at that point the value exchange is very high for her, and like at that point you have an edge over everyone else. But it doesn't mean you can be lazy. It means that you have to keep giving value and keep like trying to get better over time, and you always keep up your value end. But then if you do, you have an edge over everyone else, and you win at that point. That's how you get to date the hottest girl, and it's the same thing. That's how you can have the most high value friends, is by giving them a lot of value yourself, building yourself up to be high value, and then being to the point where you know a lot of things, a lot of cool people, you can help them out in different ways, and you can be of really high value to them, and then suddenly everyone wants to be your friend and wants to hang out with you. And the same is true for companies, for businesses, whether it's B2B, business to business, or B2C, business to customer. Whoever you're serving, you have to give them extremely high value. It's like the fucking law of physics. Like I'm like really seeing this, that if you don't give value, it crumbles and it doesn't work. You can't make it work. You can't like just slap a product together and like make it like a recurring product or subscription or high ticket and like a few idiots buy or something. It doesn't work. Like it kind of crumbles at the bottom of it. It does not last. And the whole thing is like a giant like value thing, and the more value that you can give, ultimately the better. I'd seen what I've been observing now in business, I think, is like there's like a few rules. Is that one, can you be consistent and have structure, and then be consistent with your work and what you're putting out? Second is, are you giving high value? Are you reaching people, and then are you giving them extremely high value, so when they get their product or service, they're very happy, and then maybe they can have positive word of mouth and stuff. If you're really high value to them, then you deserve your wealth. If you are not super high value to them, then you perhaps don't deserve your wealth. And then at that point, it's depreciating and it's crumbling, and you're kind of at a loss. I'd seen the same thing with training and lifting too. Is like you really have to be training hard, eating well, sleeping well, putting in good nutrition, and there's no bullshit to it. You have to be giving your body value in terms of the workouts that you do, and if you're phoning it in and you're giving bullshit workouts, then you don't get the same results, you know. And it can fall apart at any of those places, at not getting enough sleep, at not getting the proper nutrition, not eating your fruits and vegetables, or getting enough protein or carbs, and not getting enough proper nutrition, or not having your training be proper. At any of those points, if it falls apart, it's the same thing. Your body's not getting enough value. You're not going to make the same progress in the gym or physically, or like with your training, that you would if you're giving your body value, you know. It's very simple, like value. That's like a fundamental law. And yeah, and that's the thing. There's like a few more things I can say too. I might just briefly. So like one thing that happens with some companies is that they give value at first, and they give really high value, and then they get some money, they get some results, and then they start to skimp their value at some point, and they don't have the same standard. And what happens is like a general decline. And it's dumb, because if they survive at all, then they're making their existence much harder, versus if they didn't do that. You know, the feedback loop is bad. It's like a restaurant. Let's say they make the best food and they're really awesome, and all these people are coming in, and then they're making a lot of money, and they're like, oh wow, like let's save money, and like they kind of get lazy with their cooking, and then they make dishes that are like recipes that are just okay, you know, and they kind of use different ingredients, they use cheaper ingredients, they cut different stuff out, they reduce their portion sizes, reduce their plate sizes, they don't give good service anymore, and all of these things lead to kind of customers gradually over time being less happy. Gradually over less time, like less people start to come, they go to other places that give better service and better value, they tell less of their friends about it, and gradually over time, at first you don't see it, but then there's over time a decay, you know, that is you don't get to see like right away overnight, but then gradually over time, give it 6 months, a year, 2 year, you see that decline, you know. So that can happen. That happens with car companies, that happens with any company. Anytime you forget about value and giving value, that's when you start to see that gradual decline, and you stop making progress, and then you start to depreciate. You're always either getting better or worse, and that's in anything. So like you have to have the goal of continually improving, innovating, and then giving more value, or you're gonna regress and get worse, and you lose that value equation, you know. One other thing, because I'm trying to just getting everything out of my head, is in terms of jobs and positions, you know, like you see that, like if you get tenure as a professor, or if you get like a full-time position in like a government job or something, or certain other examples of that, you literally, they say like you can't get fired, like oh, like you, unless you like kill someone, like you're not gonna get fired. And then what ends up happening is they can be lazy and do a shit job and still get to keep their job. And like I've seen it with professors too, where they can be lazy and really not do a good job, and like that's it, and like they still get their check. But what is it and you can say, I guess this would be like what my philosophy is, or like at that point it's like it's fraud, it's like dishonest work, and you're getting paid for something where you're not legitimately giving value. And at any other point you would get fired. If it was by a law of nature or by evolution, it's like okay, people wouldn't want to be with this teacher, and this teacher, if he's doing such a bad job, would get fired. But because of like government and like artificial kind of bureaucracies and systems like that, they can kind of artificially put something up there where they're like, oh, it's like not making money, and they can keep pumping it with stimulus money or bank funding and stuff, you know. And so companies doing horrible, they can just put in more money, more funding, even though it's not making any profit, or like making shit revenue, you know. And it's the same thing, the teacher is doing like a really shit job, and then they're still paying him, and like he's tenured, he can't get fired, so like they still pay him. What is it at that point? You're breaking the law of nature, you're getting paid, but at that point it's, I guess, like fraud or deception, where you're basically stealing money. You're not giving your end of the value, and because you're not giving value, because you're not giving good service, you shouldn't be deserving that return of good value, good service from whatever it is that you're doing, and as you're doing like a poor job of it. And at that point it is stealing, and that's kind of what it is. You're breaking that law of the universe, you know. And it can fall apart at some place, but really it's like you give up with your own life or something. It's like you see that with like teachers that stop caring, they're like lifeless and they're like soulless. Or happens to government employees too, where they're if they're not giving that value in their job and they're not doing a good job and trying to get better at it, they'll be like soulless and empty, versus certain people that really do love their government job, and like certain professors that really go above and beyond to give their students very high value, you know. And they don't get paid as well as an entrepreneur does, because they can't use that same leverage, but they can be fulfilled in like the work that they do, you know. And that's the thing is, versus if they're kind of skimping on the value, then you become empty and soulless, and like there's like no purpose to your life, there's no purpose to the work you're doing, you're not helping other people. You're, as human beings, we're meant to serve the greater collective, and serve humanity as a species, and kind of further our own evolution and further evolution of the humanity of the species. And if you're not contributing to that, then you're kind of holding that back, you know. You're not giving that value. So that's kind of what I see too. And that's what ends up happening if I guess with like yeah, teachers or government positions or politicians, where they're really not giving value, and they're getting money, but at that point it's like you're illegitimate, you know, you're a fraudster, or like stealing at that point, and it's not that different from a Ponzi scheme or from something else where you're stealing, you're breaking that law of the universe, the law of value. It's the equivalent, I mean, it's like the same thing. It's like if you like rape someone, that it's the same thing, that you're being intimate with them, but like you're stealing it from them, you're taking something precious from them, and you're not getting it legitimately, you know. They're not opening themselves up to you, and you're kind of taking it by force. And it's maybe the same thing, like any of these positions, it's like they're taking it by force, but like the government's doing the force, or the bureaucracy is doing the force, and they're just handing it to this person who doesn't deserve it and is not doing the value work to deserve it, if that makes sense. So those are some different ideas I had. I think it's very simple, and like I'd really recommend, if you guys are into reading books, read the autobiography of Henry Ford, read How to Be Rich by J. Paul Getty. Those are two of the best business books that I've read. People like to read like self-help books and more common books. I guess it's not bad, but when you read like autobiography, you really learn like the principles and their way of thinking. Like you can read a billionaire's book like that and see like what got them there. And honestly, it's like very simple principles like this: being extremely high value, continuing to innovate over time, and realizing that like everything gives to entropy. Everything kind of dies over time. It's like a law of nature, so everything has to keep getting better and keep innovating and improving. Value is the king to everything. I'd say that as like a kind of new entrepreneur. Value is extremely important, and it's you can't cheat that law. It's like cheating a law of the universe or a law of nature is if you're not giving value, you die. And maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but give it a few weeks, a few months, a year, you'll die eventually if you're not giving value. And if you are giving value, you have a good shot, you know. And a lot of people are not giving value. Henry Ford says in his book that he started business when he was like 40, and that he looked and he's like, wait, like why is this the norm, that like fucking over people and trying to cheat the customer or fuck them over or get as much money from them as you possibly can, that's like the standard, that's the standard practice, and that's the norm. And he's like, wait, this is like ridiculous, this is messed up. Well, why is this the case? And like he wasn't happy with his cars were decent or they were good, but he knew they could be much better, and he wanted to continue to improve them. And he didn't even want to go into business until he had the perfect car, until he had a car that was such a high standard of value that he felt that it was worth charging money for and worth like selling to people, you know. He didn't care if like otherwise he didn't want to make money. He wanted to give people high value, high service, and be able to do that. And if he couldn't, he didn't want to give them his car that was subpar, you know. He wanted to make the best car that he could and then give them a very high value car that gives them good results, gives them happiness, gives them something that brings them joy, and gives them high value, you know. And that was the thing, and he wanted to make that car, so he worked really hard to make it. And yeah, he just didn't want to break that principle of value. And I think this video is getting kind of long, but anytime you try to break that principle, it can be really bad. So it's important to kind of not, and just give high value, and in return, like, you get value, you know. In return you get the high income and stuff. Trying to remember something. Just that Henry Ford, I guess his goal never was like really high income. His goal was to give the highest value that he could with his cars, and then he scaled it by doing that with many cars. And fuck, there's like something I'm trying to remember, but I like can't remember. But anyway, if you're an entrepreneur, give high value. You'll have an edge over everyone else, because people just try to like shortcut it or like give bullshit. But it's a law that like you get value by giving value, and like you get value in proportion to the value that you give. And that's kind of it. You know, there's some perceived value, and there's some leverage in there with sales and being able to charge a little more, a little less, but you really have to give extremely high value or you're dead. And that's like now or later, but you're going to be dead, you know. So if you're an entrepreneur, give high value. And if you're a worker, and in general, you should give high value in your work and in all the other areas of your life. But yeah,